We made this.
You are listening to Pick a Disc, the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason I want to. I am your host, Matt Latham, and this is episode 136. And I am proud to bring back onto the podcast Jon Porobil, who's going to be talking about the Joplin group / band. I can't remember which one is which, but the album's called Useful Music, and we're talking about that one. So, yeah, as usual, we'll talk about the bands, blah, 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 and the album, etc., etc. Bit about the backstory of why there seems to be multiple versions of it, and there's a few other odd tangents that we go on. But yeah, so before we play on that, this is the usual bit where I say, if you've not listened to us before, or if you have listened to us before, but you're not following me on any of the social medias, then please do search Pick a Disc on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever. It is probably me that's on there. If you look for Pick a Disc, it's me. Yeah, there's also the Discord server. If you look in the show notes, there's a link to the Discord server. Come and jump on, say hello. And yeah, I think that's it. I can't think of any other admin to think of. So let's just hit play on the interview and speak to Jon. When I've had returning guests, I think one of the first things I usually do is like, oh, when was you last on? And then I'm always surprised at how far it's been. I mean, that's happened a few times in the past, but like, it goes, oh, it's been about 3 years. Oh, it's been about 2. But I think I was chatting, I can't believe that it's been over 2 years since you was last on, Jon. So Jon Porobil back again for his 4th appearance, I think.
This is number 4. That's right.
Yeah. So how you doing,
Except for
Jon?
2 of those I was guest hosting.
Yes, true. Yes, actually, yeah. You've actually guest hosted more than you've appeared as a guest, which is a.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I gotta get back on here and fix that.
Yeah. But how you doing, Jon? How you been the last time since we've seen you?
Oh, I've been great. Thanks for having me on here, Matt.
No, always welcome, always welcome. It's always a lot of fun chatting to you. But yeah, so it's not me choosing this time for a change. It's you that's choosing it. So you know what? Let's not beat around the bush and just tell the lovely listeners the disc that you've picked for us to talk about today.
I've chosen the album Useful Music, which was originally released in 1999 and then re-released on a major label in 2000 by first the Josh Joplin Band and then later renamed to Josh Joplin Group. And we're talking about the 2000 re-release.
Okay, yeah, which is not confusing at all.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten into the mysterious alternate versions on Spotify, which I tried to research and still don't know anything about.
Yes, this is a mystery of a mystery of a mystery. So where's Columbo when you need him? But yes, Useful Music by the Josh Joplin Group, released in some year, either 1999 or 2001. Why have you picked Useful Music?
Being liberated to make the choice myself. Mm-hmm. I thought this album is just really important to me. It hit me at just the right time when I was 15 or 16 years old and made a deep impression on me. The lead single from the album, Camera One, managed to be a pretty big radio hit, at least here in the U.S. I don't know if it made much of a dent overseas, but and so that was sort of my gateway into it. And I was, a pastime of mine at the time was, when there was a big radio hit like that, I would seek out the album, and I was really impressed with what I heard. It quickly became one of my favorite albums, and I also picked it because it's kind of forgotten about. Like, I don't hear anybody talk about it much these days. And I think it needs its roses.
Okay, so how did you discover Josh Joplin / his band / his group?
Yeah, my high school friend sometimes would throw recommendations at me, and I think in this case he sent me an email. It didn't have a subject line, it didn't have a signature, it just said, "Listen to Camera One." Okay. So I went and found a copy of the single, and I thought it was a really good song. It's well paced, it's well produced, and the lyrics are poignant. It's a song about a failed actor who reading between the lines a little bit, appears to take his own life at the end of the song. So, it's depressing, but also the music is kind of uplifting, in a weirdly dissonant way that very much appeals to my sensibilities. And that would have been it. One night, I had a school assignment, and I was way behind, and I was stressed out, and I couldn't keep my eyes open. But I said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to wake up really, really early and finish it in the like the 2 extra hours I'm going to give myself in the morning. And so I woke up at like 4 a.m, and the radio was trying out the second single from Josh Joplin Group, which was "I've Changed." Now, let me editorialize a second and say that from a marketing standpoint, I feel like that was a really terrible decision for a second single. I don't think that song it doesn't seem accessible or marketable. But if your goal is to appeal to a young Jon Porobil, bang on job. Like, I heard that song, I was like, oh, he's got other songs. And this one's really good. And that's another song in which suicide plays an important part. I think the character in that song doesn't actually take his own life, but 2 in a row in which that's the text or subtext. And I was really, it made a deep impression on me, and that was when I sought out the album and tried to find some of the earlier material that he'd recorded with the Josh Joplin Band, although this was before streaming services were a thing, and all the CDs were out of print and rare and cost over $100. So I never really found any full albums, just a couple of standalone songs in my searches. And Josh Joplin Group came out with one more album, and then Josh Joplin came out with a solo album. Both of those are also really good. I don't know what else to say. I'm a fan for life.
So it was definitely the useful music album that was like your first foray into Josh Joplin and stuff. Yes. Okay. For those who are unaware who Josh Joplin is, Josh Joplin, who was born Joshua David Bloom, is an American singer, songwriter, as well as a music and film producer. He founded the bands Josh Joplin Group and Among the Oak and Ash. His song Camera One was the first independent release that hit #1 at AAA radio, and his song Blue Skies Again was recorded by Jessica Lee Mayfield for her non-such debut, Tell Me Pitchfork. Praised his song.
I want to record an album now called Tell Me Pitchfork.
I was going to redo that again, but I'm going to leave that in there. Yeah, I missed the full stop. Damn it, Wikipedia. So yeah, his song Blue Skies Again. His song Blue Skies Again was recorded by Jessica Lee Mayfield for her non-such debut, Tell Me. And Pitchfork praised it as simple. The infectious chorus makes it stand out. It's also a sunny, reassuring song. And Joplin has toured extensively in North America, Europe, and Australia, and recorded several albums with different bands. So, yeah, that's Josh Joplin, who I think when you mentioned the name to him, I'd never heard of him before. I had no idea who he was. Don't remember the singles or anything. So this was like new to me. And when I went onto Wikipedia, I was like, saw his photo that's on Wikipedia, and I was like, okay, he looks like a member of They Might Be Giants, but he isn't. So he's there. So he's there with like a jumper and tie and guitar with glasses and short hair and stuff. And yeah, feels. I just saw that, I was like, is he a member of some? Is he like a member of like some kind of band that I might be familiar with? But no, he wasn't. So yeah, so I go into this completely and utterly blind.
Well, that's always refreshing. You get something completely new to you. What did you think of it, Matt?
I mean, when I was listening to it and stuff, and okay, it's not the kind of stuff that I would perhaps choose to listen to. So it's more of a singer-songwriter kind of like a full orchestra type sound and stuff. But I found it quite interesting, particularly with perhaps stuff that it reminded me of. When I was reading into it, there's people that compared it to other bands that I'll probably bring up later on. I was like, yeah, I could kind of hear that, but yeah, I can kind of see this is like someone who's pretty much got free reign to kind of do what you want. So I'm assuming this was not on a major label. It's a lot more independent, or
right. So we alluded to the history here. It was recorded on. The album was originally recorded and produced by Sean Mullins, who is another one of those guys who had like one hit in the U.S. And again, I don't know if it was a big deal in the U.K. But he had his own label. He signed Josh Joplin to it and produced the album. And then I don't know what the machinations of the industry that lead to this are, but like a major label, Artemis, like shopped around and picked them up and had Jerry Harrison, who's the keyboardist for the Talking Heads and later became a pretty big deal producer for indie bands, re-recorded Camera One, and then they re-released the album with everything else the same, but Camera One was replaced with a new version produced by Jerry Harrison. So,
and was that and that was with the Josh Joplin band, or was this the group at the time?
The first one was with the one that Sean Mullins produced was with the Josh Joplin band, and then I guess they had some lineup changes and decided to rename themselves to Josh Joplin Group for the re-release. So if you look, there were the earlier version of the album. It had a very strange cover art. It was like a pink background, and it had like a collage cutout head of a person who's not in the band at all. And it just had like typewriter face saying useful music. And I think Artemis was like, "What? We want to actually sell this thing, guys. So why don't we why don't we do a photo shoot?" And you see a picture of Josh without the glasses, and he's in this blue car, and he's got his hand like just hanging out, and it's a little more. I mean, if I'm being honest, it's a little blander, but it's more like what you think an album cover might look like.
Yeah, so I'm just Googling it now, and so this is going to be, well, I say twice in a row, but be twice in a row that we'll be talking about the album art, which is kind of rare for the podcast. So I've just Googled it, and so the first one was like that kind of pinkish thing with the kind of photo fit face, where the bottom, where it's like newspaper clippings over each other, which is kind of it is kind of a weird, like, kind of weird.
I mean, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but if I were judging this by its cover and not hearing the music, I would probably pass on that record.
Yeah, definitely, and but the second one that we are talking about, it feels it definitely feels late 90s, like kind of late 90s, like album, but I don't know. There's like something almost Springsteen-ish. I think.
Yeah. I think that's definitely what's being evoked here.
Yeah, I think if you're judging books by its cover, I mean, I think the sound of what the album is, I wouldn't have assumed that from the cover. If I'm honest, I would have thought it would be a lot more heart rocky, kind of like Gaslight Anthem, Springsteen-y type thing. So it feels like he's on the verge of driving onto the open road, putting sunglasses on. With like,
well, I think what it does get at, even if it was sort of misleadingly implying that kind of Heartland vibe, I do think it's indicative of one of the big themes of this album being Americana, like American life, suburban life, and especially cars, which, or not especially cars, I would say especially travel, moving around. Joplin himself definitely moved around a lot. He toured a lot. He's called like 6 different cities his home base city for over the course of his career. Having a car, what kind of car you have, being able to work on a car, it's a big deal in America, especially in a particular era of American life and suburban life. And I think that shows in some of the topics of some of these songs.
Yeah, I totally get that. There's like particularly with like the vastness and openness that is, well, basically the big chunk of land that is America, because it's like massive, and I'm saying that as someone whose country is pretty much is like 1/60th the size of yours. 60th the size of yours, but yeah, I can kind of get that release, but it definitely focuses on the Josh Joplin aspects of it, so it's kind of like singer-songwriter type stuff. So do you know much about the difference between the band and the group? So what's the difference between them? Is this like a Taylor Swift type situation where he kind of re-records it under a different name just to
Honestly, I mean, Wikipedia says there were lineup changes, but I think the biggest difference is that the band is on a minor label and the group is on a major label. I think that's it.
Okay. So so I mean, to the point where the Josh Joplin group has its own separate Wikipedia article from Josh Joplin. So yeah, it says it was Atlanta, Georgia based, and it was initially a trio of Joplin. He hired Jeff Milliconen who do bass, viola, and vocals, and Jason Bucher, I think, to do drums, percussion, and vocals to accompany him to play shows together. And they called themselves the Josh Joplin Band. But in late 1995, producing the first album, they just basically started touring. And then, based on critical success on some airplay on radio, Joplin, Bucher, and Melkonian started touring vigorously, starting in the South. And eventually, as I go down the Wikipedia article, it's not very kind of easy to read who joins and who doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the curse of having a band that had what I would describe as a minor hit and not much else, because they're just not super well documented. They weren't in demand for interviews. They appeared on the late night talk shows like once. Oh, yeah, I know, Dolly. It's a shame. There you go. They should have been more famous. I agree. But because of that, there's just not a huge body of writing about them. So there's not a lot of info about, why these things, why the name change, who these people are, why they come and go. When you're at this level of indie, the sad truth is there's just not that much money flying around. So it's very possible that some of these, that, insofar as they've had personnel changes, it might be somebody who's just like, this isn't sustainable lifestyle. I got to go be a school teacher somewhere or something. And, that happens sadly a lot. And I just kind of assume in the absence of any like major earth shattering story about the drama, that's probably just what happened.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of trying to skim read. I can't see any major changes, but the past members do list Joplin, Carlin, and Bucher, but also Alan Broyles, Dee Davis, Annie Cordero, and Eric Taylor. So there's probably touring members that took place and kind of lineup changes. But annoyingly, there isn't a very handy timeline. Those like really kind of cool Wikipedia graphs that show
we need
the
like we need like a Gantt chart.
Yeah.
That's what those are called.
There isn't a Gantt chart for the Josh Joplin group, and but because they're pretty cool. I mean, I started reading the Fall one in like several years ago, and I'm still halfway through it. But,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised that I never appeared on it. There's a quote saying that at some point everyone will be a member of the Fall for 15 minutes.
That was a famous guy from where I'm living right now, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's what we can kind of gather from the Just Joplin group. So there's not much about them online, and not much written about the album. There's a couple of blog posts about this album, I think, that I managed to read about, but there didn't seem to be much else about it. So it's kind of like under the radar for most part, but yeah. So
yeah, and we're really sailing without a map here.
Yeah, it's one of those episodes. But I think with the actual album itself, I feel like, I mean, considering if we consider the episodes that you've been on, so for example, like Scatman John, Dan Byrne, but more importantly the Bare Naked Ladies, I can kind of see similar. Well, actually, no. I can got similarities on this album to all three of them, even the Scatman John record. But particularly with, say, if not perhaps Maroon, but perhaps the later Bare Naked Ladies, where they're kind of maturing into a more radio-friendly, or I don't say clean, but probably kind of cleaner, polished rock. Yeah, radio-friendly is the term I'd use, but I don't mean that as in like it's watered down. I think clean's the better one, where it feels like I know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say
Clean in like the design sense, not like as
yeah,
in not vulgar.
yeah. So it's kind of like accessible. So accessible. So it's kind of like I think I use the term soft rock to describe Haim when we covered, I think, last episode when, which hasn't actually aired at the time recording yet, but with Haim I used the term soft rock because it felt like it was kind of, it wasn't heavy, it wasn't full of distortion. It was like, it was using, I think with rock music, I think particularly, I think the distinctions between rock and kind of soft rock or kind of radio friendly rock is how much they use the distortion pedal. I think, and
Well, sure, and when you turn the distortion off and you just run the electric guitar through the amp without effects, you know what they call that?
no,
Clean.
clean. Fair enough.
They call that the
It is
clean
clean.
guitar.
Clean. Fair enough. We'll do that one.
But yeah, soft rock gets a bad rap as a term. I feel like that just became associated with like late period Chicago or like Michael Bolton and became sort of a derisive term. But I feel like it has more use. Oh, it's useful music. There we go. That's
Yes, useful music. Yeah,
it's a term that we abandoned before it outlived its usefulness.
hmm you can probably imagine a lot. You can probably imagine this when you probably have a lot of seated audience. I think at live shows, I think that kind of music. I think where like where the audience probably don't really want to jump around, or songs that not really jump. You don't really jump around at those kind of get that kind of music. I think the
kind of music that olds like.
sit down music. Sit down music.
A couple weeks ago, my wife and I we went and saw Grace Potter, who very like is an old school like classic rock vibe, a lot of distorted guitars. You know, she could be pretty heavy at times. But you know what? We actually sprung for they had general admission and then they had a seated section, and we were like, are we those people that we need to pay more to get chairs? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We sat down for that concert. It was a great show.
Yeah, I've not. Well, apart from when everyone was sitting, I've not been. It's very rare I've gone to seated shows. It's only like when the whole audience sits I've been to. I think it's only been like 2 or 3. Although when I went to see Maisie Peters last year, I was in the upstairs seated section, but I was at the back at the top where I could stand, and I actually quite enjoyed it. I had a decent spot looking at the stage, but I was standing. I was leaning on a pew. I was putting my drink on the actual rest shelf, and I was able to actually take my coat off and put it on the floor in front of me rather than tie it around my waist. And at that point, I realised, Matt, you've now become middle aged.
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, I think it's like nice to kind of like sit and feel the vibes rather than just standing and jumping around. So it's that kind of accessible rock, and
yeah, I mean, and if you okay, yeah. Yes, and I mean, I think that speaks to why it was so appealing to me and why it continues to be a very important album to me, because it prioritizes the same things I do in music and songwriting. Like, the melodies are very strong. Every single song has a really strong, singable, catchy melody. It has a good structure. It has, they're very clean arrangements. They're well paced. And like, these are all the qualities that I look for in music. They're not... For probably a few years, I would go so far as to say this is what good music is, and I'm, now I'm a lot more laissez-faire about it. If you have other priorities in music, that is totally fine. But this one speaks so clearly to my own sensibilities that I can't help but love it, and I think a lot of my friends, especially so many of my friends are musicians now, and I say, if you like my music, you should listen to this guy.
Interesting as you say that, because I want to segue slightly, because in 2 days' time, on the day of release, you've got a new album out. And I think one of the things that you mentioned to me when you said you wanted to talk about this album and was that it's a very strong influence on you as a songwriter, and particularly I think the album that's coming out in the next couple of days. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a few people that I recommend my friends listen to if they really like my music, or sometimes I think the opposite. I'm like, look, if you like my music, don't listen to these guys because they're giving away all my secrets. You listen to Josh Joplin, you can be like, oh, that's where John got this from. Or another one is Jonathan Colton. Another one is the Mountain Goats. Like these are bands that are sort of skeleton keys. But here I am redirecting. So yes, in 2 days, or if you're listening to this episode more than 2 days after it's published, then right now I have an album out. It's called The Camouflage Kid, and I have been working on it for about 3 years. Originally I was like, oh, this will be a quick one. Partly because it's ambitious, and also partly because various life events conspired to make this a long delay for me. For instance, for about 4 months last year, I had my younger brother living in this studio. So had very limited access to recording time for the duration of his stay with us. But yeah, it's a really personal album. It's musically ambitious, especially in the use of guitar. I'm playing a lot more lead guitar on the album than I have in previous efforts. And it's personal. The Camouflage Kid is a story of getting over a sort of traumatic youth and learning how to branch out and be a person in the world.
Okay, and so what is it about useful music that you feel that kind of helped craft what eventually becomes the Camouflage Kid?
Definitely Joplin's strong emphasis on melody, vocal melody in particular. I really admire and sort of took as point of inspiration his or his producer's sense of pacing in songs, how you can have songs that build up to a sort of soaring chorus, and sometimes after that build up, maybe kind of pulling the rug out, going back down to a smaller arrangement. I also really like the way Joplin kind of hops around genres, right? So, we open on, in useful music, we open on Matter, which is kind of an aggressive, like, still not like hard rock, but like the aggressive side of mainstream rock, with the heavily compressed, drum machine-y sounding drum track and the distorted guitars, and then segue into more of a like lightweight pop song like Gravity with the clean guitar and acoustic guitar. Later on in the album, we get this like almost psychedelic experiment in Who's Afraid of Thomas Wolfe. You get the tender piano ballad with the vinyl crackles in the background and Phil Ox, or Phil Oaks. That's one of those ones I've never known if I'm mispronouncing it all these years. And then like a genuinely earning that title soft rock song for the closer, Dutch Wonderland. So like not feeling restrained to a pigeonhole is another thing that's really important to me, and having different experiments, which is why my album can open up on this like mostly instrumental kind of prog rock thing, and then segue into like a really hard alternative song in Grey Rock, which is the heaviest thing I've recorded to date, and then go from there into sort of like a modern electric/electronic pop song, and then from there into like this vaudeville style song of Indelible. I want to be one of those guys that like you'll never know what I'm going to do next.
and that key influence, and that's one of the key influences that you've taken from Mr. Joplin. So
I would say so for sure.
Okay. So let's move on to actually talking about some of these songs then. So where do you want to start with?
Well, we did already talk about Camera One, and I've changed. The third single, which I never once heard on the radio, I only know this was a single because I bought the CD single of it on eBay. That's the kind of obsessive fan I was. Third single was Gravity. And this is a really great example of that melodic core in its finest, because we're dealing with like pretty simple chords on the guitar. Like I think he's playing like mostly a D and a D suspended. So like somebody who's just learning guitar could pick this up pretty easily. The melody is what keeps it memorable and anchored, and that vocal performance in the chorus. I mean, there's a little bit of vocal flourish when he goes gravity, right? But like it's a really well crafted song, one that has a lot of vivid images and also just has a melody that I think complements the theme. I like in the end of that chorus when the band almost just kind of hangs on that last chord. It says, everybody falls in small degrees, and the band just kind of hangs and gives Joplin some space to take a breath before he goes, it's gravity, right? And like that musically is sort of the song appearing to run out of momentum, and the falling rhythm of the phrase and the melody that he's ascribed to it are simulating the effects of gravity. Just kind of, when you stop putting up the effort to keep something aloft, it naturally falls. And that musical, the musicality jibes with the lyrical theme of the song in a way that I find really satisfying. And you'll find that it's like that for most of this album. There are things about the craft that maybe you don't even consciously realize when they're happening, but like when you think about it, you're like, oh, this feels natural, but it also connects with what the song is about in a really elegant way.
Yeah, I think when I first listened to this song, I think I was like, oh, this is reminding me of stuff. And as I was reading the very few kind of comments on like Rate Your Music and kind of blog posts and stuff and the odd reviews, everything, everyone kept like comparing this to REM and particularly Michael Stipe.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the song where I think like I was like, okay, I can hear Michael Stipe in kind of Josh Joplin's voice here and stuff, and particularly for the first like 30 to 40 seconds before like the rest of the music kicks in. Like if you told me it was an REM song, I might believe you. But then I think as the rest of the instrumentation kicks in, it kind of brings in a kind of more unique variation where it's like, okay, there's a lot more going on here than perhaps like you expect, like than REM. So there's a lot more interesting things building up in the background and stuff. But I've always thought that I always found it quite interesting that when I'm thinking, oh, this reminds me of Michael Stipe, and there's actually quite a few people and the comments online were pointing towards that. So it's that kind of alternative.
Did you happen to explore any other Josh Joplin music in preparation for this episode?
As a rule, I usually don't. So I don't try to.
Yeah. So the follow-up album, The Future That Was, which came out, I believe, in 2003, actually has a song called Happy at Last, where the opening lines of the song are, I sound like Michael Stipe. I dream like Carl Jung. Yeah, it's great. So he's aware.
Kind of self-awareness of that stuff. But, yeah, I think one of the things I did quite like about, particularly with this song as well, is that I've always really quite liked songs that I refer to them. I don't know whether it's exact terminology, but I've always referred to them as verbose. When there's like a lot of lyrics, a lot of density in stuff, which is why I probably resonated with rap music or technical rap music when I was younger. But then like artists that have basically a lot of lyrics in them, and there's a lot in this. So if I look at the lyrics on Spotify, because that's the only place I could actually find the lyrics, was actually on Spotify. There's like, I couldn't find the Genius page for this. It's like you have to scroll for a good few seconds before you actually get to the chorus. And I've always quite liked kind of density, so I quite like there's a lot of stuff happening lyrically in this. So I found that quite interesting before you get to the, like, we can't get off the ground. Even though technically there's a weird typo on the Spotify lyrics where they spelled can't, where it says we can't get off the ground, they spell off with 3 Fs. So, but yeah, I quite like that from.
You didn't hear that in the recording? He says we can't get off the ground.
Yeah.
No,
it's the Hannibal Lecter off of.
A little gross.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to talk about lyrically dense songs with a lot of words in them, maybe we could talk about Superstar.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most verbose song on this album by a significant margin. In fact, I would say he's actually rapping a little bit, I think. I don't think he's trying to do a rap song, but I think he's rapping here.
So, so I'm going to read you what I actually wrote for this.
Okay.
Because Superstar, I can definitely feel a strong influence on John as a songwriter. This reminds me so much of Popstar off Scatman's World. So
that's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
so from what I've listened from your stuff, I can there's definitely I can definitely feel like, particularly when songs I know that you've done that's as I would describe verbose or with like kind of longer verses than usual. Um, I can definitely hear an influence on you from this, but it also reminds me so much of Popstar.
It's interesting because, like, thematically, I feel like it's almost the exact opposite of Popstar, because in Popstar, Scatman John was talking about this sort of exaggerated cartoon version of what fame might do to him.
Mm-hmm.
And Josh Joplin's Superstar, he's singing about these people who maybe have dreams and aspirations of being more famous, but like it's a very grounded and it's a very grounded story about more normal people, right? Like there's just a guy waiting on a bus. There's a woman who's dancing at a strip club, and people who are struggling to get by or just barely getting by, and sort of finding their contentment in their own situations.
Mm. But yeah, the same. But this is one that I really quite liked as well. It's kind of out there, bombastic, kind of like bombastic, and yeah, it's like the quasi, almost potentially rapping, but perhaps not delivering stuff. This is the one that jumped out to me. The one that jumped out
There's
to
another
me.
thing. Oh, well, I'm glad that one worked for you. There's
Hmm.
another quality of this song, and it's true for a lot of the album, which is an emphasis on keyboard instruments. This is
Hmm.
something that I find I never like think, oh, this has a piano in it, I'm gonna love it. But I always find that the songs I love, I'm like, oh, hey, that does have a piano. And Superstar has a piano and an organ at the same time, which is uh, that's a decision you don't hear very much in modern pop, but I just really appreciate it when they do that. So because the main riff of the song is that piano, the ascending down, 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 down in the piano, and then the bridge of the song, I think, is where things really start cooking. When Joplin starts singing, "We all want to be okay," the piano is still playing, but we also have that organ line where he's playing those seventh chords, going do 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 under Joplin's vocals. Like, it's hard for me to explain why it works as well as it does, but to me, it's just incredibly satisfying. It's a real chef's kiss kind of moment.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think I was going to ask you about this as well because I think one of the notes I've got as well is that I couldn't figure out whether there was actual different instruments playing or if it was other instruments digitally changed to sound like other instruments, like whether he was doing all sorts of different guitar effects or whether he was using like MIDI sounds on keyboards and stuff. I couldn't tell on some
I
of
mean,
the.
that's how I do all my stuff, but I know Joplin had access to a studio and was probably using acoustic instruments, or not acoustic instruments, but like the real deal instruments for most of this album, I, except maybe a few cases where they were using uh, either a fake or MIDI instrument for effect. Like I would imagine there are some synthesizers in Thomas Wolfe, Who's Afraid of Thomas Wolfe, and the piano in Phil Oakes, which might be a real upright piano with a low pass filter and some effects to make it sound old timey, or it might just be a fake piano. And I'm not sure which. I don't think it matters. But you've really described a lot of how my process works. I mean, like,
Okay.
a lot of the instruments on my album are what you call fake or MIDI instruments that I've manipulated because, like, there's a lot of freedom. The tools are there now in the 2020s where it's not that expensive to have access to really powerful music editing and manipulation tools. And I like taking full advantage of that where I can.
Yeah, I think there's. Yeah, I think a couple of artists I know that I quite like that have when I've seen live as well, they'll like sample stuff, and or at one point when I went to see Ellie Dixon last year, she actually sampled someone's voice in the crowd and pretty much basically
Oh,
started doing.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you might hear on my song Prince Charming, which is on the upcoming album. I also released it as a single a couple years ago. Like, that is an orchestral pop song. There's a symphony orchestra in that song. Um, it may surprise you to know I don't have access to a full symphony orchestra.
No.
So yeah, those are, and like, I'd like to think I did a pretty good job of simulating that, but it's all MIDI instruments. Every violin, cello, viola, contrabass, trumpet, and especially the harp in that song, which is the first time I've ever arranged with a harp. I think they come together really well. I'm probably a trained ear can tell the difference, but like, I wanted to do an orchestral pop song, and when I hear that, I think, yeah, sounds like an orchestral pop song to me. I think I did it.
But yeah, and I think but heading back towards Superstar, I think with the kind of say with the piano and stuff and all those kind of different sounds and stuff. I just quite again, it's one of those songs which like starts off, but then kind of builds up as it goes on to like crush.
Absolutely.
So it kind of like builds to something which is like something that goes through that and stuff. So where do you want to move on to next?
I have a story about this album.
Okay.
That it's not about any particular song on the album, but I don't know of any other place to fit this in the discussion, and I didn't want to let this whole interview go by without talking about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in like 2011, 2012, before they had YouTube Music, Google debuted this product that was at the time just called Google Music Beta.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before Spotify even came to the United States. So the idea was not what you'd now call like an all-you-can-eat streaming service. The idea was that if I had a desktop at home and a mobile phone and maybe a desktop at work and maybe a laptop that I carry around and travel with, I would be listening to music. I would be listening to music as MP3 files on each of these devices, and it was a hassle to have to synchronize them across everything. Like, if I had a copy of Useful Music on my home desktop and then I wanted to listen to it while I was at work, I'd have to bring it over there, or I'd have to remember, where I uploaded it or something. So Google Music, what they did was they had a software that would scan your whole folder structure, it would upload everything you had up into the cloud, and then you can access your entire library from any other computer you happen to be at.
Yes, I had that as well.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't aware they had ever actually launched it in the UK. So that's cool.
Yeah, but then I eventually ended up migrating to Spotify in the end. But yeah, I remember setting up that software. Particular, yeah, I definitely remember because I remember listening to like a lot of stuff like Maximo Park. I think when I was listening to them quite a lot, nearly 9-10 years ago now, it was through Google Play Music. And I remember it took me ages to figure out how to sync the damn thing with Last.fm. But yeah, so carry on.
It had issues. Like,
Yeah.
it was not the smoothest software experience. But anyway, about a year after they launched this beta, Spotify came to the US, and Google, I think, felt obligated to pivot a bit. So they changed it to Google Play Music, and then they changed it to Google Play Music All Access, which was when they actually introduced streaming, like as a competitor to Spotify. So when they started introducing streaming, now, I'm going to preface this so that neither of us gets sued. This is a theory that I have. It is not confirmed. In fact, Google has said the opposite. Google has said that they did not take existing users' uploaded libraries and they didn't use those to build out their streaming. I happen to think, personally, that they're lying about this. And I'll tell you why I think this. I had a copy of Useful Music that was repeatedly ripped from CD and then burned to another CD and then ripped again and then burned again. And then I had one that had been in my car for like 2 years straight and got a little dinged up. And then I re-ripped it. And so there were errors in the version that I had on my computer. Notably, the song Here I Am had some weird skips in it. And notably, Camera 1 had a couple of errors in it. And after Google went to the all access model where they offered a full streaming library, I would listen to useful music there, and it would still have these errors. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean anything because Google still offered the upload your own library thing. So, for a little while, until they switched over to YouTube Music, they remained a hybrid platform where you could listen to your own uploaded music alongside the streaming library. But I had people who did not have access to my copy of Useful Music and who had never listened to Useful Music before. I asked them to pull it up on Google Play Music All Access, and they confirmed it also had the skipping parts in Here I Am and Camera One. To which I say, I am terribly sorry if you tried listening to Useful Music on Google Play Music All Access between, say, 2012 and 2017. Because if it was messed up when you tried to listen to it, it is probably my fault.
Wow.
Sorry.
Because I know...
I loved this album so much that I ruined it for so many other people.
I mean, there's gatekeeping, John, and then there's gatekeeping.
Again, Google denies that they did this. They say that they did not take user-uploaded content and make it available to other people. But I seem to have evidence to the contrary. So, I don't know. Draw your own conclusions. But if you did happen to listen to that album and were wondering why it was like that, yeah, it's probably my fault. I apologize.
Yeah, I know probably in the past that it would be if you use Google Play Access Music, because I definitely did, because I remember paying for it. But then I then eventually shifted because I could get, and still do, get Spotify as part of my mobile phone contract, and have done for as long as I can remember now. But I think I do remember that apparently saying that the MP3 library will be hybrided into the online thing, so that if you listen to an album that you had uploaded through that interface, it will play your MP3 for your local versions rather than the actual streaming versions, which probably would explain that. But then I can't explain how other people independently was able to hear the imperfections.
Exactly. And by the way, that's why I stuck with Google Music until they killed it, because it was the only service that you could do that with. I have friends who are musicians and they produce independent albums, and like for some of them it's the only way, like they're not on the streaming services, so I wanted to be able to access these albums and the whole streaming library. So, RIP Google Music. YouTube Music does not fill all the same niches. It never will, and that makes me sad.
I think Amazon have got something is closest I've come to see something similar to what Google Play Music did, because I think pretty much like they say, oh yeah, if you buy this, you get it on you get the MP3s on AirPlay or something. And I was like, oh okay. And I remember buying a physical vinyl of something a while ago, and then finding that because I bought it, I could access an Amazon cloud with music that I purchased. And I think, oh, that's cool. What else is on here? And the first thing that I ever bought on Amazon was, I think, a DVD copy, I think, of Red Dwarf 1 and Eminem's Encore. And this was in 2004. So, yeah. So I remember it was the first thing I ever bought online, I think, was on Amazon. It was quite exciting for it to finally arrive. I'm like, oh my God, I finally bought something online. When I go onto that Amazon cloud thing, I have access to Eminem's Encore. It also gives me the Ministry of Sound Best of Ibiza Chill Waves, which is something that I bought as a birthday present for someone I used to work with all the way back in 2010. But so I think
the benefits of having a rich history.
Yeah,
but deep corporate pockets.
Yeah, but that's the closest I think I've ever gotten to that Google Play kind of model of the tech and stuff. So yeah, I was just looking back. I'm like, bloody hell, it remembers everything that I've ever purchased, and that's on physical as well. So I think that's a kind of clever way of doing it, particularly because you don't have particularly some vinyl now don't have the vinyl like MP3 download codes anymore. I've only recently, after years and years and years of I've recently started to go and purchase CDs again. And basically the first thing that I do is upload the MP3s to MP3s. Yeah, and then the CDs, particularly the two that I bought earlier today, which was like the Last Dinner Party and New Dad. Uploaded them to MP3s, and then they're just going to go and probably just gather dust with the rest of the CDs.
Exactly. I've had the opposite situation. I've had an album I wanted to buy digitally, and because like I don't even own convenient CD playing devices anymore, and the only way to do it was to buy the CD. So I have. Oh, hush up, Dolly. So like I definitely have probably at hand here. No, these are all mine. Hang on. Here, my earlier albums. Pop and Happiness is Subjective. This is a recorded audio-only medium, so pulling out the CD is actually not going to make this conversation any better. But I have a copy of an MC Frontalot album that I bought the CD because that was the only way to get the MP3s legally.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever once spun the disc, but it came with the MP3 downloads that I've used.
Yeah, I think about a year ago, I was in HMV and I saw looking at it and I saw oh look, it's Taylor Swift's 1989. I really like that album, but it was like 57 quid. And I was looking at this and out of random,
What?
Yeah, it's like it was ridiculous. It's ridiculous how expensive some of the stuff vinyl is over here now, and I think it's quite rare that I'll actually buy the actual thing on vinyl. But I went down to the CDs and I saw 1989 by Taylor Swift. This was before she announced the Taylor's version, but yeah, for $5.99. So I bought that, and I bought a couple of others. So I bought, I think, the first Maisie Peters album and the Wombats' third album on CD. Got home, ripped into MP3s, not touched them again. And to be fair, it's quite rare that I'll apply to the MP3s as well, because it's a lot convenient for me to just whack open Spotify to play them. But
oh, hooray to be part of the problem.
Yeah, but but at the moment though, it's like But when I first got those CDs, that was the first time that my CD tray on my PC, because my PC is about 10 years old, 10 years old now, and the first time I pushed the CD eject button and it wouldn't open, I'm like, hurry up, because that's the thankfully it worked, but I think if that failed, the only place I've ever got to listen to CDs is I think the PS5.
Oh, it still plays them, huh?
Yeah, because
I didn't know that. One other thing I want to talk about, and I'll use the song "Human" as a jumping point off of this. When I was 15 years old, I had my first guitar, and I started looking up chords to songs that I really liked. And I found a chord sheet for the song "Human" by Josh Joplin Group. I mean, I found a few of them, but for some reason that was the one I gravitated to at the time. And I was surprised at how easy it was to learn that song. It's some pretty simple chords. And so it was one of the first rock songs by an artist I really loved that I taught myself how to play on the guitar. And a lot of the songs on this album are harmonically simple. I don't want to it sounds insulting to put it that way, but they're not show-offy from a music theory standpoint. They're using, they're using basic simple chords. We don't have a lot of chord extensions or sevenths or ninths or, none of that jazz stuff, right? And I think that ties into why Joplin called the album Useful Music. Useful Music is it's a translation. Not the most common translation, but a translation of a German music theory phrase, German music theory word, because they like to smash their words together. But it's Gebrauchsmusik.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably pronouncing that horribly, but it's sometimes
Gebrauchsmusik.
You're familiar with it. Very good.
I don't complain, but I did get an A star in German during my GCSEs about 22 years ago. So
there you go.
And
So it comes up in classical music. It's more often translated as utility music.
Mm-hmm.
Although I took a 20th century music class. It's college level course, but I was in high school at the time, and the term Gebrauchsmusik came up, and the professors that I was taking it with said utility music or maybe useful music, and a light bulb went off over my head. I was like, oh, that's where Joplin got that. Uh, and I think it fits because like it's a term that's used to describe music that was written not out of an artistic impulse, but for some purpose. Like specifically, the example of this would be like dance music. When you write dance music, you're not writing a composition just to see where the composition goes. You're writing it specifically to a form for people to dance to. And that has been extrapolated out, like music for a ceremony, or music for background music in a film, or, music for certain purposes. And some other critics have then extended it further to talk about it as music for a skilled amateur to perform rather than like a professional musician. And I think the music in useful music really encompasses both the various layers of the meaning of this phrase, because this is music that is, evoking a feeling or evoking an activity like traveling, road trip, or feeling despondent in some cases, like more than it is the term useful music sort of implies that this music is designed to soundtrack these moments more than to stand alone, which I really appreciate about it. And it also highlights the fact that, Joplin is a very skilled songwriter, and I don't have anything bad to say about any one of these songs, but he's also skilled enough to know not to show off with music theory unnecessarily, right? We don't have the slash chords or extended jazz stuff. Like, these are almost every song here, with the possible exception of Who's Afraid of Thomas Wolfe, is something that you could learn on your acoustic guitar as an amateur, like in your first couple of years of learning guitar. And that, I think, is really beautiful about this album, that they could be so melody-driven, so emotional, have such great production and pacing, but at their core, they can be very simple songs, at their core, they can be very simple songs whose core is really easy to grasp and learn, even without a high skill ceiling.
Okay. I did ponder about what the term useful music possibly could be like talking about.
That's my best stab at it.
So whether is it useful for learning? Is it useful for listening? Is it useful to put on in the background when you're doing stuff? Is it useful just to focus stuff? Is it useful for concentration? Is it? I don't know. It's an interesting term to kind of like ponder about, or like the idea of music being useful, because music's just there sometimes. But then again, though, you have like, was it Muzak, which is elevator music, or music that's designed to basically be annoying kind of background stuff. So it's elevator music that is meant to be kind of bad, but just to fill gaps or to fill things and stuff.
That's
so
or like telephone, or like
hold music,
customer support hold music. Yeah. And I've dabbled in both of those genres as well. So, those are definitely like the most pure examples, or the most common examples that we see in modern culture. But it's a broad term. It could mean
quick
a lot of different things.
Quick side note: you can usually tell what make the phone system is based on the fact that businesses like just don't
They don't switch off the default.
Yeah, so it's like which I think might be Cisco. I think, but
yep.
Yeah.
Or the da 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 da. That's the Siemens one.
Yeah. But sorry, carry on.
I think we owe some nameless composer a nickel for singing that just now. And yeah, like I've been. You know what the worst one was? I worked at one company where the hold music was Grieg's In the Hall of the Mountain King.
There's a couple of companies I've rang that had something like that. Yeah, probably.
Why that song? That's such a tense song.
I think
Like,
it's like which songs are in public domain, or like you can do
right.
like really kind of like cheesy like MIDI versions of, or
Oh, right.
I think I remember ringing one. And it's something like Old Lang Syne, which is I don't know if you're aware of Old Lang Syne.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the New Year's song. We sing it here.
Yes, I didn't know.
Even though most Americans don't actually know what the heck the words mean.
Neither do neither do we.
Oh, okay.
It's like anyway. But yeah, I just think it's kind of funny that whether that's classed as useful music as well, because it's music that, or public domain music that's been used. Like, for example,
Yeah, they should all just change their whole music to Happy Birthday now.
yeah, basically, yeah. I was going to edit that bit out, but I'll leave it in because I annoyingly got a brain fart. Because useful music is probably music that's useful. So what? So royalty-free music, or music that people make that people can use for whatever they want, wherever they want, for free. For example, the theme music for Pick a Disc has been the same since the first episode, which has been going for nearly like almost 5.25 years now, which is not bad for 136 episodes for a piece of music that was like, oh yeah, I'll find a proper theme tune. This is the placeholder, and I've never got around to it. But Kevin MacLeod, who in Incompetech.com, that's where the music's from and stuff. I think technically that's quote unquote useful music. Is it useful as in it's free music? Is it used to people to use, or is it? It's an interesting term to think about when you. So
Well, I mean, the fact that it's free means it's really useful for people to slot in wherever they need it. Like, I've heard the same Kevin MacLeod song used in the background of 2 different YouTube channels and a video game at one point.
yeah.
So, like, and that's the risky run. Is like you use a piece like that, and it can score your podcast or your YouTube video or whatever it is you're working on. But then you run the risk of somebody being like, "I've heard that before."
Yeah. So I've not come across Pump yet. So at the moment, my experience with the Pick a Disc theme tune has only been on Pick a Disc, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, and I'm pretty sure I'm waiting for the day where I suddenly hear a. I'm waiting to hear that. I'm like, actually, you know what? I'm not going to be disheartened. I'm going to be like,
A kindred soul.
yes. Do you use it because it's great for like the EastEnders type bumping, so you can use the dish to leading while the person's talking, and you overlay that bit over the last part of the episode, so the last person saying, "Oh, thank you for having me, Matt," and you play that through. I'm getting sidetracked on there, but
Everybody listen for that at the end of this episode. You'll hear what he's talking about.
yeah, that's probably the key. That if suddenly I outsource the editing of Pick a Disc because I've finally just given up the goose and just don't want to do it anymore. That's a little kind of quirk that I feel that anyone editing will probably miss. But anyway, yeah, royalty free kind of useful music, or the different levels of what useful music can be. Like I think in your case, useful in that it's easy to kind of listen to, easy to kind of learn, and basically to learn yourself. And you could argue that like most pop songs and most pop punk songs that are like 4 chords, or Bob Dylan's, is it Bob Dylan with 4 chords and the truth? That's useful music to learn in terms of using to learn. Yeah.
That wasn't Dylan. Hang on a second. I gotta look it up though. Yeah, it was a country guy. Of course, somebody made it their band name, so when I look up that phrase, it comes up with that band now. Oh, okay, because it's wrong. It's 3 chords and the truth. Country music is 3 chords and the truth by Harlan Howard.
Okay. I'm getting confused. I think 4 chords and the truth is also a song lyric and a song title from a singer called Gaz Brookfield, singer-songwriter as well. But yeah, like that kind of. But that in that case though, it's like, isn't all music useful? But
Sure. I mean, I think that I can't read Mr. Joplin's mind here, but I think that might have been part of the point he was trying to make there. Especially all pop music.
So in terms of the actual album itself, I struggle to actually find anything to do with the reception of the album. I
Yeah, it
found,
wasn't super widely reviewed even, which
yeah,
is it's a real shame.
there's one there's one comp review on Rate Your Music, which gave it 3.5 from Aussie Bob from the 20th of January 2005. And there is actually an All Music review as well. All Music gave it 4 out of 5, and that was by Stanton Stewart, who music. But yeah, the really
One of my
long,
biggest sources back when I first discovered this album was allmusic.com, and they still have their review up. They gave it 4.5 out of 5.
yeah,
So,
the
they loved it.
yeah, the final couple of sentences. And yet, beneath the surface of each song, there is an identifiable yearning, a sense that dreams, when stripped of their impossibly wide-eyed passions, are even more worthy of being dreamed, even if the realities are so much more complex and ambiguous to deal with. It turns the mood of useful music as beautiful and ultimately optimistic as it is sorrowful and pragmatic, like the moments you tangibly understand for the first time that you can go forward, but only by letting go of a part of yourself. More than just useful, the music is, in fact, the stuff of life. And in that
Oh,
moment,
that's beautifully written.
Matt realizes when people say sentences can run on too long. but, uh, that again, that is a very nice, very nicely brief written like summary of the album, I think. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree with that.
but again, it's like it's one of those cases where there's not much online about it. And so, like, usually I'm usually finding loads of stuff like like The Guardian or Rolling Stone and stuff. There's just nothing there. But so it kind of but on the flip side, though, it probably means that at least there's something like a discovery, like a personal discovery from the album. That if no one knows that much about it, then there's a whole. It's like okay, there's like a case of okay, so I feel kind of blessed to have discovered this album that no one else seems to have either listened to or pay attention to. On the on the flip side, though, there's also the case of why has no one else listened to this great piece of album, this great
Yep,
piece of music?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So
no,
hopefully, maybe some of your listeners might be inspired to explore.
yes, and then go and explore the Camouflage Kid as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. No.
But
In fact, first.
yes. Well, yeah.
um,
If they listen to this on the day of release, they've got 2 days to listen to this, and then they can go and
that's
listen to
true. Yeah.
yes. But
Yeah, absolutely. But go to pre-save, right?
yeah,
Wait, hold on. I have a bit.ly for this. Maybe we'll get to that at the end of the episode while I'm looking up what my QR code is.
yeah. Have you ever seen Josh Joplin and his band slash group live?
Man, I wish. They never came down to the South when I lived down there. And by the time I moved up north, they were no longer touring actively.
Is he still playing live? Was still
Uh,
is still active or?
yeah, actually, so he's in this new group called Among the Oak and Ash. It's a
Mm-hmm.
folk duo. Um, I think their first album was in like 2010 or 2011, and their last album I think was last year. So I mean, they're still active, and they're probably still touring as Among the Oak and Ash. Um, to be perfectly blunt, their first couple of albums didn't do much for me. Their latest is a little bit more diverse influenced. It's more of a pop rock folk album, and I liked it a little better. Although I still haven't really fully absorbed it. I've only listened to it like twice. Yeah. I mean, there's probably an opportunity to catch them with Among the Oak and Ash at some point soon.
Mm, okay. Uh, yeah, I think looking at some of the kind of related related musicians that work with, and going back to like the musician that's like mentioned in the first paragraph of Josh's paragraph. I have listened to I think Jessica Lee Mayfield in the past as well. Yeah, because I know she was involved or featured on the among she was featured on the Among the Oak and Ash. And listener, I've had to remove about 5 times of attempting to pronounce words. And that sentence, I'm losing the ability to talk.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's move on.
Yes. So I think we kind of almost touched upon this with just what we was talking about, but other albums in the artist's discography. So has he released any other stuff under the
Yeah,
Jocelyn Group?
yeah. So a couple years after this album came out, he came out with The Future That Was, which I liked, but admittedly not as much as this one. And then a couple years later, he produced a solo album, so it's under just the name Josh Joplin, and it's called Jaywalkers.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry, no, it's called Jaywalker,
Okay.
and not plural. And honestly, that album's a masterpiece. I almost picked that instead of this one. It's very, very good. So I highly recommend you check that one out as well. And then he stopped doing music for a little while until he regrouped with Among the Oak and the Ash. And that brings you up to speed, because I talked about the Oak and Ash albums already. So yeah, there's stuff to explore. And then there are those earlier albums, which if you can find them, please hook me up.
Yeah, so if anyone's listening who has access to those, John will be very, very interested in listening. But yeah, so go and listen to them. So okay, so we're now at the important question, which is the song for the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. Now, if people have not listened to this before, what this is, I'm going to ask John to pick one song from this album to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. I can't veto it. Whatever John says goes. So, John, which song are you going to pick?
Matt, I agonized over this. I really did. I thought you could pick a song that is... I thought I could pick a song that is maybe not as ambitious, but it's just a really good example of doing what this album does at a high level, and just is like the best example of the accessible pop that this album is. Or I could pick the song that takes the wildest swing and is the most ambitious and probably the most sonically interesting song on the album. And I was really torn between these two approaches, the whole yin and yang of it all. And so I thought about this question while I was doing a recent re-listen. And I thought, I got through to the album, and, I got to Trailways, which is the one that I wanted to pick as like the accessible, like the really well done version of the like pop core of this album. And I was like, this is a really good song. I still really like it. And I got to Who's Afraid of Thomas Wolfe, which is the gonzo out there psychedelic experiment that goes in all kinds of weird places, and I still think that song is really, really good, but I didn't feel right as an album pick, and I was still agonizing as I continued to listen. And then when I got to the end of the album, I realized that the correct choice is neither, because to my surprise, I'm going with the Christmas song.
Okay.
Dutch Wonderland is the album closer, and it's the song that I'm picking for the Hall of Fame playlist, because I think Dutch Wonderland just does a lot of what this album is setting out to do really, really well. It tells a poignant emotional story, but it also tells it with vivid imagery in the lyrics, with humor. There's some jokes peppered through it, and it tells this story of like growing up in suburban America, and highlights sort of this dark underbelly that lies beneath an idyllic scene. So, we have this beneath the snow lies a dream that I once had. But, the plastic baby Jesus in the yard, great line. Johnny Cougar amplified our halls, it's a great line. And then we have the jokes. The globe was... We have the jokes like, the world was just a globe we used in class. Or the gym teacher who was always mad, and as far as we could tell, he only exercised his right to yell. And then there's this moment at the end of that song where he has a very jarring transition between... It's the last verse of the song. He says, we were the great believers in dreams that came with stars, and freedom just depended on the car. And then one day, the sky fell out and freedom lost control. So we have this moment where freedom is discussed as the abstract concept of freedom, and then transitions to freedom being suddenly no longer represents freedom, but is being used as a metaphor for the car itself. And there is no transition. It's actually a subtle but sudden shift. And as soon as you've registered that he did that, Freedom runs off the road and hits a pole. So it's this sudden transition that is used to highlight a sudden and violent death that takes place narratively in the song. So this kind of dovetails back to what I was talking about earlier with Gravity, where like the under the hood stuff, the use of metaphor, the transition of discussing an abstract concept to then discussing it as a metaphor itself illustrates the violence of that and suddenness of that plot twist. And so that just makes it, to me, a really masterful stroke of the pen, a really, like the kind of songwriting that I aspire to. And, as proud as I am of my work, I may never achieve.
But yeah, I think so I think Dutch Wonderland becomes the latest song to go onto the playlist, and my sense of continuity is slightly skew with you because yesterday I recorded the episode after this, so
okay.
And I'm not gonna spoil what it is yet, but there was a Christmas song on that album as well, so it's
no kidding.
Yeah, but yeah,
I normally don't even like. I mean, I don't like very many Christmas songs. It's rare to have one that connects with me.
Yeah,
and then to realize, and it's almost not very Christmassy. It's more just like Picture of Suburban. But Dutch Wonderland is a real like Christmas theme park in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. So like that's a real thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a Dutch in the sense of Pennsylvania Dutch, which is not Dutch at all. It's actually German, but we don't have to go into that.
Dutch Wonderland becomes the next song to appear on the playlist, following Now I'm In It by Haim and Coax Me by Sloan and I Like Birds by Eels. So it's kind of like building up to a like interesting kind of section of the playlist.
I love that Eels album, by the way. I would have picked that if it hadn't already been taken. Eventually, I would have.
Yeah. but yeah, so and aforementioned, followed by the song that I recorded about the album, with the episode that I recorded yesterday. I will
waiting with bated breath.
Yes. With that playlist stuff done and the edited out conversation that I briefly just had with you about next week's episode that I recorded. Can't
wait.
Yeah, but you're going to have to find out. You have to listen and find out which album next fortnight is. But so we're now at the end of our chat, John. As always, it's always an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I'm surprised it has taken 2 years for you to come on again.
Let's not make it another 2.
Yes.
I do have some other releases that'll be coming out pretty soon. I've been producing other people's work. So last year I had an album by a friend of mine named Craig Veltri. I produced his album, so I'm the producer on all 10 songs on that album. And I'm working on an EP that's going to come out later this year by my friend Brayley Pierce. So you could be on the lookout for both of those, in addition to the work under my own name.
Mm-hmm. And where can they find? So where can people find your work? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to streaming services and look up those 2 artists I just named. You could also go to my website, jonporobil.com. That's JONPOROBIL.com. And if that is too much spelling for you, then I recommend you go over and just pre-save my next LP, The Camouflage Kid. I made a bit.ly for this. So it's bit.ly, bit.ly/The Camo Kid. Capital T, capital C, capital K. The Camo Kid. Go there. That'll pre-save the album, so when it comes out, it will immediately go into your Spotify library. Or, if you listen to this album more than 2 days after, or if you're listening to this episode more than 2 days after it's initially published, you just go up to any streaming service and plug in my name, and you can find The Camouflage Kid. You can find my last album, Stages. I have other albums under my previous stage name, John Eric, but I'm not pushing those as hard. And, stay on the lookout for all my other future releases as well. And also, I know I said Spotify and the pre-save thing, I said all that first, but go over to Bandcamp, jonporobil.bandcamp.com. I have a pre-sale going on for The Camouflage Kid. And the thing that a lot of people don't know is I've been on Spotify for 10 years, but 2 pre-sales of The Camouflage Kid netted me more money than 10 years of all of my music on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you actually want to support indie artists, yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit more money, but I think it's worth it. Go actually purchase these songs. Purchase them online as MP3s. You'll get access to stream them from the Bandcamp platform, or you can just download the MP3 and bring it anywhere and do anything you want with it. They're DRM free, and more importantly, I get paid. So,
yes.
jonporobil.bandcamp.com, or any streaming service you like. You find my work there. Please listen, please enjoy, and if you like what you're hearing, contact me. I'm on all the social networks, except not really on Twitter anymore. My profile's still up there, but it points to other places. So find me on Threads, Instagram, the Mastodon, Blue Sky, and Facebook.
Yeah, and if you want to as well, because I'm assuming that they can, if you want to make silly videos of you dancing on TikTok to the songs, they probably will show up on TikTok.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
and may I recommend Prelude is probably a good one to do the silly dance to, or Indelible.
Yes,
both of those I think lend themselves. They would be useful music for that purpose.
Yes, exactly. And with that, we are now at the very much end of our chat, John. Please do go and listen to the Camouflage Kid. You graciously allowed me a pre. I don't know what the word is.
An advanced copy.
Advanced copy. Yeah. An advanced copy. I swear I'm going mental in my late 30s. I swear I'm forgetting things. Yeah,
okay, we've been chatting for a minute now.
Yeah,
so
advanced copy and stuff, and I think quite, and I really quite I like the album. I like the album, but I think alternatively, I think in the lead up to this episode, it was pretty much like, okay, I can definitely definitely hear the influences from this as well. So I can kind of see why you picked this and why you wanted to kind of time it for the release of Camouflage Kid as well. So go and listen to it. Go and buy it on Bandcamp and all that kind of jazz as well. So So John, we are now definitely at the end, and I just want to say thank you ever so much for introducing me to the Josh Joplin group /band/solo artist.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Matt.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky.
7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone.
9 for mortal men doomed to die.
1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne.
In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. Welcome to One Rules Them All, a Lord of the Rings podcast on the We Made This podcast network. Myself, Luke Winch, and my co-host Baz Greenland will be exploring the new Amazon Prime series, The Rings of Power. Week by week, we should be analysing each episode with a foray of guests. We have also been revisiting the Peter Jackson films and looking at them from a new perspective. So join us every week as we discuss the world of Tolkien and the Rings of Power.
1 podcast to rule them all.
1 podcast to find them.
1 podcast to bring them all.
And on the We Made This network, bind them.